Yes, hello once again, welcome back to Classic Dirt Bike TV, and as you can see we've made our way out into the lovely fresh air once again and left the confines of the CDB TV studio to make our way to South Lanarkshire near Glasgow at North Carnduff Farm to be precise, to hold round 3 of the Scottish Classic Motorcycle Racing Club's 2022 Championship. Now I did miss out on their round 2 event due to another commitment, but today we're here to cover the latest round of their current championship. Now as you can see, the weather here at North Carnduff Farm is absolutely superb. The sun's already up and shining, and it's only about 7 o'clock in the morning, but we're looking forward to seeing some fantastic racing from all of the classes here at North Carnduff Farm. Now we have racing classes from pre-1968 right up to the relatively modern classes of the pre-1984 or twin shock race machines. So what we're going to do now is have a quick walk around the paddock and take a look at a few of the bikes that have turned up to race at this event, and then we'll get straight into race 1. Okay, so our first machine is Jim Colligan's CZ, but this is actually a bike that's been borrowed from another rider called Mike Doby, who's very kindly allowed Jim to thrash the living daylights out of his old CZ race bike. But hopefully Jim won't have to use it as long as nothing goes wrong with his number 1 machine, which is his 1981 490 Michael. So next up it's Billy Pentland's YZ490 Yamaha, which as you can see is a twin shock conversion of the monoshock YZ490, and Billy will be racing his bike in the very popular pre-1984 racing class. But once again, Billy also has a second standby machine in this very nice 360 Can-Am race bike, a bike that was actually ridden to many race wins by the late Ian Robertson, but Billy's very proud of himself that he can keep Ian's memory alive and have his old race bike still taking part in these kind of classic racing events. Now next up it's this quite nice looking 1981 250 Maiko, and this is Mike van der Meer's chosen weapon for the pre-1984 class, and as you know, these 250 Maikos do make perfect twin shock racers if the tracks are a little bit tight and twisty, although this track layout here at this round 3 event is pretty fast and flowing, so Mike may find himself a little underpowered when he's racing alongside some of the bigger engined machine. But Mike's also racing this very nice CR125 Honda in the relatively new but very popular pre-1989 125 class, and this new formula is certainly proving very popular with the Scottish Classic Club, and the rider numbers are increasing week on week as the season progresses. But Mike's little 125 here is certainly a lovely example of one of these 125 Honda Screamers. Now Andy Mallock has certainly made sure he has plenty machines at his disposal for this round 3 event, and he's brought along 3 bikes, including this quite nice 360 Czechoslovakian CZ, which I must say does look like quite an original example, but just as a backup, Andy has also included this 414 Montesa Capra, which he seems to always enjoy riding when he's not slinging his leg over his big 4-stroke 500 Armstrong. But once again, these Spanish Montesa Capras are not a bike that you see around racing paddocks nowadays, but just to keep the numbers up, and he's also included his 250 version of his Montesa Capra as well, so if there should be any mechanical issues with any of his collection, then Andy's got plenty backup machines to fall back on. And so our next machine is Dougie Harrow's latest acquisition, and this is Dougie's 250 CZ twin shocker. Now again, another version of one of these very popular Czechoslovakian racers, and this race meeting here at North Carnduff Farm was certainly oversubscribed with these kind of CZ bikes, because there were plenty of these old twin shockers taking part. But Dougie will find this smaller two-stroke a little bit different to ride from his previous JBR four-stroke Honda. Now, on the subject of four-strokers, this is John Porteous's big bruiser of a Husqvarna that's fitted with that massive 600cc 4-valve Rotax engine. But if you're into your big twin-shock thumpers and you love horsepower, then I'm pretty sure that this old Husqvarna will certainly appeal to your tastes with its huge single-cylinder and twin exhaust port head. But it's quite an intimidating lump sitting inside that Husqvarna chassis. And as you can imagine, it wouldn't be the lightest of bikes to throw around a racetrack, but you'd certainly never be short of grunt, that's for sure, because these big Rotax engines certainly have an impeccable record when it comes to reliability, and you'd have to be pretty cack-handed to break one of these four-stroke power plants. But John also told me that this bike may be offered for sale quite soon, so if you're maybe in the market for a big powerful thumper, then this bike may be exactly what you're looking for. Now, the next bike that I came across on my Paddock walkabout was this old KTM 250 twin shocker, and this was a bike that was about to be raced by Chris Trotton. Now, it's another old race bike once again, although I'm not entirely sure as to what year this bike will be, possibly maybe even a 1980 or 81 machine or thereabouts. But again, it still looks quite original, but this of course is the baby brother to the mighty 81 495 KTM, which is still regarded as one of the most powerful twin shockers of the 1980s, and as far as I'm aware, the 495 still holds the outright speed record for a twin shock racer when it was clocked at 127.75 miles per hour when it was tested on a dry lake bed in the USA. But again, not many of these older KTMs are still taking part in classic racing, which is a bit of a shame, and whether that's because there's not many available or it's maybe to do with the availability of spare parts, I'm not sure, but it's still good to take a look at one of them once again. Okay, next up, a quick look at Ian Marr's CZ360. And as I said, these CZ twin shockers are fast becoming even more popular than the Michaels were from a few years back. And when you attend these kind of vintage and classic off-road events, there's never a shortage of these Czechoslovakian racers in the paddock. And Ian's example here is certainly another cracker. Although once more, of course, not an entirely original bike, as many of these CZ twin shockers are these days, because many owners do tend to fit upgraded parts onto their bikes to make them more user-friendly and a bit easier to live with while they're racing them on the track. But there's plenty parts available for these bikes now, which is another reason that makes them so popular as classic race bikes. Now, next up we have another quite unusual hybrid CZ bike, and this is John Frew's Mise 400, which is basically a 1981 Michael chassis and swing arm with a 380 CZ two-stroke motor sitting in the frame. Now, I did ask John why he decided on this Myco CZ combination, and he simply told me that he wanted to have the superb handling of that 81 Myco frame and to have the power and reliability of the Czechoslovakian CZ motor. But apparently there wasn't really a lot of re-engineering involved to fit that different motor into the Myco frame, and you have to say it certainly doesn't look out of place sitting in that German chassis, but John always seems to give me credit for naming his brand new hybrid bike, which I apparently did many years ago, but it's still a very unusual and very quick machine, I have to say. And so next up we take a quick look at a couple of old campaigners belonging to Robert Kennedy, as we take a look at his old CCM and his vintage 250 cotton Star Maker. So Robert's first machine is his 1979 560 CCM, and although this bike's not 100% original, it still has the stock CCM frame, swing arm and motor from back in the day. Now, there certainly are a few non-stock parts fitted onto Robert's bike, like the front forks and maybe a few other bits and bobs, but it still has all of the character of an old British classic in that it goes like stink and has the odd occasional oil leak from that well-used BSA B50 engine. But this is certainly no show bike, and when it's out there on the track, it certainly gets whipped to within an inch of its life every time that Robert slings his leg over it. But Robert races this bike in the over 50s class, and Robert's other machine is his late dad's 1965 cotton 250 Star Maker, which has, of course, that very light tubular steel cotton chassis with the British-made Villiers 250 two-stroke Star Maker engine in the frame. But once more, not a fully original bike, but at least 90% correct, and this bike's still being used on a weekly basis at Scottish Classic race events. But that feather-light frame and Villiers two-stroke motor certainly made this cotton Star Maker into a very competitive racing package back in the 1960s, and some of Britain's top scrambles racers cut their teeth on racing bikes like these, and although they may now look like they're 100 years old, these British-built bikes were still among some of the best UK-made off-roaders of their time. But if you were to watch the racing footage from this round 3 meeting, which will of course be my next video posting here on my channel, you can see Robert racing this bike in the pre-1968 class, but I'm pretty sure that Robert's dad will be well pleased that his old race bike's still being put to good use. Now, once again, another lovely Alan Clues CCM machine, and this time it's Jim Allison's example, which I think is a 1974 bike, which, as you already know, were all made famous by the late Alan Clues, who built a dirt bike racing empire when he made motocross race bikes using the old BSA B50 four-stroke engines. But it was Alan Clues who basically took a stock BSA motor and then tuned it for more power, and then made his own custom chassis to house the engine. But from 1973, Alan Clues and CCM built some of the best British four-stroke motocross machines of that era, and they took on the might of the big four Japanese manufacturers and quite often beat them at their own game. But personally for me, not only were these CCMs powerful and highly competitive, they also had that look and the sound that you only get from a British-made motorcycle. So next up, another nice British classic once again, and this is Colin Flockhart's 1968 B44 Shenny BAC, which is of course a Shenny built frame with a BSA B44 motor inside, but once more an old school British made scrambles bike from the 1960s that house the engine's oil inside the frame, which is quite similar to the old Rickman frames of their day. But this was Colin's first race event in about 2 years, as he's been very busy with work and other commitments, but he was certainly looking forward to getting back on his old race bike once again and taking part in this round 3 meeting here at North Carnduff Farm. And you can see Colin putting this bike through its paces on the track in the forthcoming racing videos, which I'll post very soon. So make sure you either subscribe or retune to take a look at the racing from this event. Okay, so just to finish off our walk around the Scottish Classic Club's Round 3 paddock, this is another quite nice looking bike that I spotted on the day, although this time this particular bike wasn't actually taking part in the race event, but it was ridden to the race meeting by one of the volunteer marshals. But it was such a nice looking bike, I just had to wander over and take a quick look at it. Now, I didn't get a lot of details about the bike, but it's certainly a Rickman Matisse chassis that has a BSA 650cc motor as its power plant, but it's quite rare to see one of these Rickman bikes getting used on the road, as most of them are usually associated with off-road pursuits of some kind or another. But there's certainly no mistaking that this is still a lovely old classic, even although it's just recently been road registered as a 2021 motorcycle. But again, it's quite unusual to see them with this particular BSA engine in the chassis, as it's more common to see these Rickman bikes with the more popular B44 or B50 power plants. But it still looks like it has all of the proper Rickman bits and pieces fitted onto it, including these stock matchless brake hubs, which were a very common fixture on many of these remanufactured Rickmans. But it certainly looked the part, and it was attracting a lot of attention over the course of the day. But it just goes to show you some of the weird and wonderful motorcycles that you can come across when you turn up at these kind of vintage and classic scrambles events. And so there you have it. That concludes our quick walk around the racing paddock, but you can see all of these featured bikes and many more taking part in the racing when we return with all of the trackside action from this round 3 event here at Carnduff Farm. So once again, thanks for watching, and we'll speak again very soon. So it's goodbye for now.